If your nonprofit is fundraising in the state of Arkansas, then this is an explainer you really won't want to miss. Today, we are breaking down everything you need to know about the state's charitable solicitation registration requirements.
This explainer is part of the Multi-State Fundraising Compliance series, where our goal is to turn these complex regulatory topics into practical, easy-to-understand terms for nonprofit leaders just like you. And this resource is provided by Ironwood Registrations.
Okay, let's dive right in. So, as a nonprofit leader, you know just how much work goes into securing that federal 501c3 status. It's a huge focus. But what a lot of organizations don't realize is that there's a whole other layer of regulation at the state level, especially when it comes to fundraising. And honestly, ignoring these rules can cause some serious headaches. Things like fines or even having your fundraising activities shut down. So if you're planning to ask for donations in Arkansas, this is an area you've got to get right.
So how exactly do you navigate this regulatory landscape? Well, in this explainer, we're going to answer all the key questions. Who's in charge of these regulations in Arkansas? Does your organization actually need to register? What does that whole process look like? Are there any exemptions you might be able to use? And once you are registered, what do you have to do to stay compliant? Let's find out.
First things first, who is the regulatory authority for charitable fundraising in Arkansas?
The agency you'll be dealing with is the Arkansas Secretary of State. Specifically, it's their Business and Commercial Services Division that's responsible for administering and enforcing the state's charitable registration program.
All right, that brings us to what is probably the most important question for a lot of you watching. Does this actually apply to my organization? Let's break down who is required to register.
In Arkansas, the rule is pretty straightforward. If you are asking for contributions, you generally need to register first. This applies whether you're an organization based right there in Arkansas or if you're an out-of-state group asking Arkansas residents for donations. So if you're targeting donors in the state or even using professional fundraisers to do it, you fall under these rules.
And what's really interesting here is just how broadly Arkansas defines solicitation. It's basically any request for a contribution. This means you don't need a physical office or any kind of footprint in the state to be subject to their laws. The simple act of asking is what triggers the requirement.
Just think about all the ways you fundraise these days. You know, that Donate Now button on your website, your email blasts, your social media posts. Yep, all of these are considered solicitation in Arkansas. This is a common trip-up for nonprofits because they often don't realize their national digital campaigns are triggering these registration requirements in multiple states. So you've looked at the rules and determined that yes, you do need to register in Arkansas. What's next? Let's walk through the initial registration process.
The process itself is actually pretty straightforward. You'll need to complete the state's charitable organization registration form, pull together all your supporting documents, and then submit the whole package to the Secretary of State. And you've got options. You can file by either mail or email.
And the good news is that the required documents are pretty standard things you likely have on hand already. We're talking about your Articles of Incorporation, your IRS determination letter, a list of your officers and directors, and your most recent IRS Form 990. Now, if you're an out-of-state organization, you'll also need to file a consent for service of process. That just appoints the Arkansas Secretary of State as your agent for receiving any legal notices.
And here's some really great news, especially for your budget. Arkansas doesn't charge a filing fee for charitable registration. This is a welcome relief for sure, especially when you think about how fees in other states can range anywhere from a few dollars to several hundred.
Now, before you rush off to file, it is really important to know that not every single organization needs to register. Arkansas, like a lot of other states, does have exemptions.
So the big question is, could your organization be one of them?
The most common exemption out there is for smaller organizations. So if you raise less than $25,000 a year and all of your fundraising is done by unpaid volunteers, you might be exempt. Religious organizations and accredited schools may also qualify.
But, and this is really important, exemptions in Arkansas are not automatic. You can't just assume you qualify and decide to skip the registration process. You have to formally apply for that exemption with the state to be legally covered.
Okay, let's say you've registered. You're all set, right? Well, not exactly. Registration is just the first step. There are ongoing requirements you have to meet to maintain your good standing. Arkansas does things a little differently. They don't have a traditional renewal process, but they do require an annual financial report. This report is due 6 months after your organization's fiscal year ends.
And if you think you'll need more time, you can't request an extension, but you have to do it before the deadline hits.
So what's in this annual filing? Typically, it includes your IRS Form 990. Larger organizations, though, may also be required to submit reviewed or audited financial statements, which just provide an extra layer of assurance about the accuracy of your financials.
Now let's zoom out a bit. Most nonprofits these days don't fundraise in just one state, right? Your online campaigns can reach people everywhere, and that has some pretty big compliance implications.
This is where things can get really complex. Because fundraising is regulated state by state, a single national campaign means you have to navigate this patchwork of different rules and regulations. If you're fundraising in, say, 40 states, you might need to register in all 40 of those states, and each one is going to have its own unique process and its own deadlines.
You know, at the end of the day, it helps to remember the why behind all this paperwork. These laws are ultimately designed to create transparency and accountability, and that's what builds public trust in the entire charitable sector. As your nonprofit grows, your compliance obligations are going to grow right along with it. And staying on top of this patchwork of state fundraising regulations can feel like a full-time job. If you'd rather focus on your mission than on paperwork, a specialized firm like Ironwood Registrations can help. To learn more about how they can help you navigate the complexities of multi-state compliance, you can visit ironwoodregistrations.com.